Thank you for the introduction. I don't know how long we're given. I assume it's also an hour. Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank KSI and FIAPC for inviting me to this year's Housing and Property Summit, which I believe centers on a theme that is highly relevant in today's market situation, reimagining development in the post-pandemic era. I'm sure many of us are encouraged with how the economy and the property market have steadily rebounded last year with 8.7% GDP growth and between 25 and 30% rebound in property transactions. However, amidst the positive trends, albeit the anticipated headwinds of global economic slowdown, we are still plagued with some persisting challenges within our market. And one of the most talked about challenges is housing affordability. Our topic for this afternoon is the affordable housing conundrum. What's next? And to discuss this lingering dilemma, I have the pleasure of introducing four distinguished speakers who will share their thoughts shortly. Our first speaker, who will be joining us virtually, is Dr. Suraya Ismail, the Director of Research at Khazanah Research Institute. Dr. Suraya is a Chartered Quantity Surveyor and a member of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, Malaysia. She is presently a council member of the National Cost of Living Council and the National Council of Digital Economy and the Fourth Industrial Revolution, Malaysia. She sits in the advisory board of Saw Swee Hock Southeast Asia Center of the London School of Economics and has served as a visiting scholar at the University of Cambridge. Welcome, Dr. Suraya. Our second speaker is Associate Professor Akitek Sarly Adre bin Sarkum, the President of Pertubuhan Akitek Malaysia. Akitek Sarly is currently an Associate Professor at the University of Malaya and the Principal of Sarly Adre Sarkum Architecture in Berhad. Welcome, Dr. Professor Sarly. Our third speaker is Benjamin Ong Chi Yi, the Chief Executive Officer of Property Subsidiaries at Malaysian Group of Berhad. Mr. Benjamin is a quantity surveyor and a member of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. He started his professional career as a Chartered Quantity Surveyor in Davis, Langdon and Shire before joining the Malaysian Group in 2017. Welcome, Mr. Benjamin. And finally, and certainly not the least, our fourth speaker is Mr. Ismail Ho, the Chief Executive Officer of the Ho Chin Sun Research. Mr. Ishmael is a lawyer by training, graduated from the UK. He left the legal practice to join the property industry, where he first joined Cushman & Wakefield Malaysia. He's now the CEO of the well-known map-making company, Ho Chin Sun Research. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Ismail Ho. With the diversity of experience and perspectives of the panel of speakers today, I'm confident that we'll be able to have a very fruitful and diverse session. Just to quickly recap on how the session will go, each panelist will be given 8 minutes, no more, to present his views on the topic, followed by a Q&A session of about 10 to 15 minutes. We shall end the session at, I suppose, 5 o'clock with a brief recap of what's being discussed. Now, without further ado, may I invite our first speaker to share her thoughts. The affordable housing conundrum, what's next? Dr. Suraya.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Tan Sri and esteemed panelists, as well as KSI and FIAPC for affording me the chance to give some of my views, sharing my views to what I think is a conundrum in the housing affordability issues in Malaysia. Let me begin by just saying that I will speak on 3 matters in this time allotted of 8 minutes. And we'll be very happy to discuss further later if there is any questions. The first that I think is very important to understand is, are we in an affordability crisis? As we have done some research on this since 2015, we have looked into the affordability issue in Malaysia and at the state level as well as the town level, because as you know, affordability is not about measuring it at 30,000 feet. It is because, as we all know here, the housing market in Greece is not similar or the same as the housing market in Ipoh. It depends on local conditions of the household and local conditions of the supply sector. So when we actually do an indicator or we measure, I like the fact that today a lot of things are being said about measuring. We measure what is affordability, we look at market affordability, meaning at the distribution of income, household income, at that very different heterogeneous localities with heterogeneous people. What is the level of affordability afforded by the supply sector from incoming or existing stock into that local market? And we have seen by and by that we have not achieved a median multiple of 3, except for certain states only and certain markets, local markets within that state. Now, the first thing we have to then address is why is this happening? I will go further on why it is even more tenacious now. But let's just look at the baseline before the pandemic, and then we'll go on after the pandemic. One of the issues, I think, to my opinion, why we are stuck in this problem is because when government do policies, it appears as if there's no demarcation of where the private sector should play and where the private provisioning should be part of. So for example, when we look at housing for need, not for effective demand, housing for need. So we have to categorize what are the affordability issue for people in need, the poor, and people in the market sector, so that we are clear that you can't just jumble up things and then you say it's not affordable. That's not right. So the measurement of what is affordable to the poor and what is affordable to the rest of society are two different things, because the affordability problem for the social sector, those in need, these are your PPR, your low-cost housing, that's the manifestation of what is people in need, is first and foremost an issue of poverty, not housing. It's not housing, it's issue of poverty. So, but the social sector primarily houses residents due to poverty or those categorized as the economically vulnerable. In order to address these problems, solutions must therefore involve policies for the alleviation of poverty. Because if you have negative externalities of not having shelter, then you have other issues, homelessness, living a life of no value. So the state support or any white knight developers that want to go into this social sector must get government assistance, because this is within the overarching, for me, responsibility of the state, whereby kebajikan, social need is catered by the state, because poor people can't pay the price or the cost of building homes with decent quality. Which brings me to a second point. Quality of housing is very important. Wouldn't it be great? And I say this with tongue in cheek maybe, but as all of us, we're all consultants and technicians, professionals here, the CIDB has come up with a decent housing standard. Dasar Perumahan Mampu Milik has come up with decent housing standard. And yet, more and more people not want to follow these standards. And they say that's in the affordable category. So this is really not something that we should look into or I'm sorry to say follow, because if you give the poor something which is substandard, then there goes the original objective of giving them shelter to begin with. And then you ask them to buy houses that are not in a good condition and difficult to maintain, and then you say this is asset-based welfare. I think this is a sin, outright sin. Now, having said that, okay, so now what? Where is that demarcation? So from our estimation, each state can have like 20% in different, as I mentioned earlier, it's a different type of location, different type of income that is within a basic need approach. Now, say for example, that basic need is 20% of population. Say for example, now you have 80%, which is in the realm of the private sector provisioning. But, so this is the conundrum. Now, so imagine all developers need not go into the social sector, need not go. But a significant proportion of households, and not just the poor, the current situation now, are saying that they can't afford the housing provision by the private sector. And because of this, more and more of state is going into the M40, so to speak, type of provisioning because it's too expensive. Now, this makes it the problem more complex, and it should be, because first you have got to stay within your fence, lah kan? Why are you going muddle into each other? And this is where the problem, I think, to my humble estimation, we can actually do a proper solution if we understand where is the market forces should be thriving. Now, I think my third and my last point for today is, okay, so let's look at the private sector provisioning pula. Okay, so we did a study from 2009 and 2019, and the composition of, say, for example, houses in 2009 launched at less than 200,000 and up to 200,000 is 55.2% of all total stock, but it has been reduced to about 15.7% in 2020. So homes that are provided or transacted, incoming stock, from 55.2%, it has gone down significantly to 15.7% in 2020. On the other hand, the percentage of home more than 500,000 has increased from 10.5% in 2009 to 24.6% to 2019. Now, this is a clear mismatch when we look at the demand condition. When we look at the income of the local population, the 3 times median multiple does not warrant this type of housing, except in some urban cities, KL or Penang. But for the most of other cities or small towns, this is not the housing price gauge that we want, price strata. Now, in making housing affordable, the median income, the median multiple should follow the income distribution of all in the population. So it's not about labeling ini affordable housing, ini tidak, because at the end of the day, for the private sector, it is making housing generally affordable to all, but at the income that they can buy these products, which is the 3 times median multiple. Now, there are some that say, oh, it cannot be done, and therefore we have to extend financing so that it becomes 40 years, so for some 50 years. But this is not, to my estimation, not the way in which we should tackle affordability, because you can't mask affordability with financing. Why am I saying this? If you look at the data that we have, and we have published this a lot, in order to get a thriving real estate, existing and incoming stock, most purchasers or household should not hold their house too long because they're property ladder. So first 10 years, and then after that they buy another house, and then that's a thriving real estate. That's what we want, right? But when you do longer tenure financing, as well as higher price, we see the impact. We see that people are holding their houses for 30 years, 28 years. That's the average, meaning that's the only house they can buy and purchase. So this is not the thriving. Oh, start off this.
Thank you, Dr. Suraya.
Okay, finish. 8 minutes.
That was very good, but it was 8.5 minutes.
I'll shut up now.
Thank you, Dr. Suraya. Now, I would like to invite Associate Professor Sarly to give his views.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tan Sri. Wonderful, passionate speech by Dr. Suraya. I'm conscious that I have 8 minutes. Next slide, please. So I think the affordable housing conundrum and the idea of what's next. Next slide, please. I think the supply of housing is very much there. We have a huge overhang, and I think this is a systemic issue. It's not, but in 8 minutes, I would want to solve the housing problem, but just to highlight where it's headed. But I think the heading where it's just affordability is a price point, and I think the big issue is increasing the purchasing power of the general public in order to fulfill that price point for affordability. Yeah, but my focus today is more on what's next for affordable housing or even lower cost housing. Next slide, please. What I want to highlight is the livability, because a lot of times when houses are built, they are just meant to be boxes and not, oh, thank you so much, are not actually decent places to live for the long term. And as Dr. Suraya mentioned just now, some of them live there for 30 years and whatnot. So we really need to focus on livability. I mean, there is a fundamental difference from where we came from in the villages last time and where we live now. Not just the high density, but the ability to actually evolve our house. When we were in the villages, an area is automatically safeguarded. When the house is too small, it becomes larger. There are options to make your house better. But in the city, what usually happens to an area like this is that when someone improves their livelihood enough, what they do is they don't improve their house or care about their neighborhood, you know. At first, it's difficult to care because they are worrying where the next meal is coming from. How can you care about, you know, your neighbors or your cleanliness of your neighborhood and whatnot? Now, but once they reach that threshold where they can actually be a bit more comfortable, their spending and whatnot, they move out. They move out to better housing. So eternally, this place, either affordable or lower end affordable, will become like a slum. So we need, in terms of creating housing, to be conscious that if we are not careful, it's not just about affordability, it's about livability and whether it is a decent home. I think Dr. Suraya also mentioned that just now. And unfortunately, this just reflects to the very great divide from the haves and haves not. And I think that is the systemic root of the problem, because affordable housing, separation between the rich and the poor is just the symptoms. But the fundamental issue is actually how we treat our society. Well, gotta be quick. So, but the solution is, of course, for those who are looking into urban planning and town planning, is to actually have a robust mix of economic stature in one development. That means if you have a development, you need to have people of a lower income, middle income, and higher income all living in one place, rather than separating, oh, the rich live in a rich area, the poor live in a poor area. That is a solution for a disaster, a solution for a future class war, yeah? Because that's where you get all your social problems, because as I mentioned, this lower cost area would always be a place where people would live, and nobody would want to live there. And that part of the city would be dangerous, dark, you know, and neglected all the time. So what these two projects is, one is by Bjarke Ingels, the big group. It's a social housing in New York where there's various units where people can actually live, and it's a public housing, so it's via lottery. So they rent, they pay, but not everybody can get. The other one is Alejandro Aravina's incremental housing. So this is a Pritzker Prize winner. One of his idea is that you build only half the house, so that in the future, when your family is larger, you can actually extend the. In the beginning, the house the empty space might act as a parking garage and whatnot, or event space. But in the future, when the house, when you have more occupancy, when you have more need for space, you can actually build there. So we should start looking at this type of models, because at the end of the day, we are not just creating, we don't want to create affordable house. We want to make it workable, livable, and we are trying to create this as part of jigsaw puzzles that we want to insert into livable cities and workable cities, yeah? We want a pleasant place. We are not just wanting to treat the symptom of affordable housing just by providing that, yeah? But we want to treat the root cause and where we are going. Where we are going is towards Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, and all our cities being places where people want to live, not people want to, you know, don't feel safe in the streets and whatnot. Because once you have people who are actually invested in the community, then all these ideas about passive monitoring of security, these ideas about cleanliness, these ideas about caring to your neighbor can happen, or else people will, you know, people will be only concerned to be living in the gated communities, which is not, as I mentioned just now, I don't think is the right solution. So I think I leave you with this, so of course, like a picture to ponder on how we're actually doing housing. Because maybe, you know, we are just, you know, by repeating the same process, we cannot expect a different result. So if our approach is the same all the time, you know, don't expect in 10 years' time you will get a solution. You need to do something out of the box, or rethink the box the whole, in the whole sense, yeah? So I think I end with that. A bit early, Tan Sri?
That's fine, that's fine. Thank you, Associate Professor Sarly. Now I shall now move on to our third speaker, Benjamin, to present his views.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Thank you, KSI and FIAPSI, for your invitation. I'm very glad to be coming after Dr. Suraya and Professor Sarly. So they have cleared all the studies and all the charts. This is a very hot topic. I would like to start with my ending statement. It's a bit controversial, but houses will never be affordable. Hear me out. Hear me out. Don't panic. Newspaper, don't simply write. The reason why I say houses will never be affordable, because affordability is something that we always constantly have to work on. Yes, policies. Just now, Dr. Suraya has also mentioned about it's tied to the income level of the location. Let me give you guys some context. Now, housing affordability does not mean house ownership. It's two different things. You can't afford a house. In certain countries, there's social housing. That means you can rent. But somebody needs to build the houses. Be it the government, some NGOs, UN. Houses don't pop out of thin air. We can't pray for houses to fall down from the sky. Somebody needs to build that on a piece of land. Somebody needs to build it either on timber, 3D print, paper, whatever. Somebody needs to build all this. Somebody needs to put in the pipes, the water, the electricity, unless you want to live in caves. But even if you want to go back and live in caves, with now we're probably bordering 7 billion people on this planet, how many caves can you find? Because you will either have to outfight your neighbor for that cave, or you have to outbid him with money. That's where affordability comes in. Someone has to pay. And someone has to pay constantly. Unless like the Avengers, Thanos snaps of a finger, half of us get wiped out, then prices can come down. But if we continue to produce babies, our population will grow from 7 billion to 8 to 9, and God knows what number we will end up with. Land is scarce. Material is scarce. One thing is for sure that is constant is inflation. No matter how much we try to combat it, it is real. This is a reality, full stop. Whatever government policies, doesn't matter if it's Pakatan or whoever, we all face the same problem. So don't cry. This is a reality we have to face. Second thing I want to put in context, when it comes back to somebody has to pay for housing. Oh, I live in this country. Government support me. Okay, you complain you don't have a house. You complain government don't build houses for you. You complain developers don't make houses cheaper. How much taxes you pay? You Google it right now. Actually, I just Googled it before I came in. The best country with social housing. You guys can Google it right now. Denmark. Best country with social housing. All of us go on study tour. Wow, come back on holiday from Europe. We'll say, oh, best, number one. Oh, best. Oh, houses there so good. Everybody's so happy. Everybody got houses. Google the next thing. Personal income tax in Denmark. Google it. Personal income tax in Denmark. 52%. In Asia, the best public housing, South Korea. Google the income tax. 45%. And this is the truth. Countries with high, good, or, people shout about good public housing, someone has to pay high income tax. Either the government spend it wisely, or they come from oil from the ground, or from your pocket. It has to come from somewhere. Countries with high home ownership. Let's look at our neighbors. HDB housing in Singapore. In Malaysia, affordable housing, we talk about the cheapest, one of the cheapest states, say in Johor, 40,000 ringgit, you get a flat. Somebody needs to pay for the lift. The lift will continually break down. Nobody pays for maintenance. Somebody needs to come and pick up the rubbish. Then we blame the government for not picking up the rubbish. Government says, I don't have enough income because nobody pays maintenance. Then we look into context. HDB, flat in Singapore. Do you guys know how much is the average price of an HDB flat in Singapore? Per square foot is 500 Sing. It's 1,500 ringgit per square foot for HDB housing. You can go out now and buy a KLCC property. I think coming back to context, I know it's hard. Being Malaysian, it's hard. But I think we really need to hold into context these questions that we have in place. Someone needs to pay for it. Nobody, and I said, can do it for free. No country can do it for free unless the country wants to go bankrupt. I don't have an answer, but I would like all of us to put this in context and put it really in our heart. But what is it that we can control? I think Dr. Suraya, Professor Sarly, they have all the numbers. Dr. Suraya put a very valid point. Affordability really comes from how you can eradicate yourself from poverty. Yes, government policy and that. Let's not talk about things that we can't control, things that we can control. I read an article. You know who is, during the pandemic, over the course of pandemic, just today's world's richest man went back to Elon Musk because his share went back up. 2 weeks ago. Do you know who's the world's richest man? Just 2 weeks ago. Anybody? Okay, let me tell you. The world's richest man just 2 weeks ago Bernard Arnault, the owner of LVMH. And we talk about the world coming out from the pandemic. Everybody's crying because of inflation. I'm suffering. I don't have a house to stay. But all of a sudden, the world's richest man is in the luxury business, selling handbags and brandy. Why? Have you guys been to shopping malls lately? And then you see LVs and Dior's and long queues. The number one purchaser of LV handbags is Asians. And that is all news. Google it. Asians. It is a real fact that parents nowadays, they say that I can't afford housing, but what I'll do, I'll just buy my kids a handbag. I think we really need to rethink ourselves on the trends that is ongoing nowadays. I won't say houses are there at a certain price for whatever reasons, whether is it policy or cost, but whether or not are we rethinking, are we re-educating our population on the importance of placing your money at the right place. And I think then together with the government, with the relevant industry players, we tackle issues of price inflation, cost increase, government policies. And I think together we are able to solve it because they are successful cases. But I think we need to start from within. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. Thank you. Now, our final speaker, Mr. Ishmael.
Thank you very much, Tan Sri. In the interest of time, hopefully I can cover mine within 8 minutes. Okay, just for my session, I'd like to touch on 2 points. And hopefully in today's sharing session, I'd like to bounce some idea. I love to view myself as someone idealistic. Perhaps some of the ideas or suggestions, not very practical, but perhaps if one day we do explore, it could provide us something, right? So just a quick recap. The topic of affordable housing, when was it at its prime when everyone was talking about affordable housing? Is it in today's current times that we hear a lot about affordable housing, or perhaps about 10 years ago? So just a quick recap, 2012, that was during like Prima time. It was then, during the good times, where people are more concerned about affordable housing because they see people are buying house, developers are making good money, a lot of projects being launched, full lines. So those that did not buy house became, oh, we are very interested, oh, then it became an issue. So why I want to recap this, and nowadays we don't really hear much about affordable housing, it's more about where's our next meal going to come from, more on cost of living. So back then, if you remember, why is affordable housing such an important issue? Is because at the end of the day, this issue is very politically sensitive. So let's acknowledge that first. For the politicians, issue of affordable housing is whether I can solve it, or at least I look like I'm trying to solve it, it wins me votes, and people can support, oh, okay, this leader is doing something. So during all the way 10 years back, that was when the topic of affordable housing was at its height. But there was 2 big issues. So the first one is that you have federal government and then you have state government. So this is no surprise, we are all in the industry. It was very funny at that time, when you flip the newspaper, you will see, oh, this is federal initiative. So and so using a vehicle to produce 1 million housing within certain duration. And then the next page you flip, oh, this state government has this initiative. So you're scratching your head, okay, who's trying to solve this issue? Because the truth is, if they don't work together, you cannot, because land matter is state matter. So it was during that time where it was very funny, because you will have the developers is the one that building hard, put in the rumah serangaku, and then you have the Menteri Besar taking all the credit lah. Their face is there, oh, this is the rumah, the number of units coming up. So that's the first thing we acknowledge. So moving forward, I would not suggest to again create another vehicle or create another initiative, because at the end of the day, later we will have every few years change of taglines. We don't need that. Change of tagline. So there are already existing vehicles that perhaps people like SPNB, maybe, UDA could be the champion. And when we say them being the champion means the game is different. They should not be viewed as a competitor to developer. That means special help or assistance by the government should be given. So back then, if you talk about like Selangor, you talk about like Penang, these are the states that as for many years are considered opposition state. So now, no more excuse, right? Someone got practically 2/3 majority, you can do a lot of things. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now federal and state government, in my ideal world, they'll hold hand and then they solve things together. Now, second is, of course, the topic of affordable housing, there's many angles. Design, there's many angles. But what I want to touch on is just about a different way of looking at housing beyond just Ministry of Housing. So what do I mean by that? Housing affects the nation as a whole. So you shouldn't be saying, okay, this ministry, please solve affordable housing issue. It should be go all the way even to the PM. The whole nation should work hand in hand. Because when you talk about housing, is where you place people. And where you place people affects their productivity. So if our mindset is shifted from, I have a land, how much can I monetize it? Or which developer can bid it at the best price that I can make money off in the immediate future? So that shouldn't be the mindset. The mindset is, okay, I have piece of land now, I'm the state government, big, large tract of land. How can I make the people or the city efficient? That the youngsters, the young professional, do not need to travel 1 hour every day, commute one way, then another hour back. There's a lot of loss of productivity. So the point on location. So first one, maybe we look at government reserve land. So there's a lot of examples. Those are maybe rubber research land, or even sometimes like university where have a lot of tracts of land, but they are not fully optimized. So that's number one. Number two is, at today's day and age, when we talk about national security, military, combat, it's very different with maybe 40, 50 years back. Yet our military camps have been placed many, many years ago. There are a lot of military camps in cities that perhaps you want to revisit. Should we have them there? Or we can situate them somewhere else, and you unlock the value. Because it's like a myth that we always love to repeat. Greater KL, Klang Valley, no more land. No more land, scarcity. But yet it's actually a matter, in my opinion, a matter of not optimizing this. So the first one was government reserve. Second is military or army. And third, maybe the last one that I love to touch on is Malay reserve. So what do I mean by that? Let me explain a bit. When we look at land use pattern, in fact, some of them are in wilayah persekutuan, so they are urban area. You will notice, Malay reserve land, non-Malay reserve land, a lot of development. Sebelah, 1 story, 2 story. So that there is a lot of potential that is not unlocked. So I'm not here proposing, we should just straight away do away with Malay reserve policy. No, that's not the direction. I don't think any government will take that approach. But as I mentioned just now, we have some other vehicles like SPNB, UDA, perhaps could be the champion. And perhaps the government can have a special arrangement that if you can get all these landowners to then amalgamate the land, then you do for affordable housing. I'm sure if you're talking about this is an initiative to house the nation, it's not political suicide. And that, Tan Sri, I think 8 minutes, I'll pass back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ismail. And thank you, our distinguished speakers, all three of you, four of you actually, one on Zoom. We shall now have a Q&A session, and the floor is now open to all participants. Please come forward to the mic and state your name and organization, followed by your questions. Maybe just to get the ball rolling, I just have one small question for the last speaker, Ismail. As an experienced map maker, I'm sure you have come across potential land banks that could be developed into affordable housing estates. Do you see any opportunities for the government to make use of their land banks to build these units, and what have been holding them back from doing so?
Thank you, Tan Sri, for the fantastic question. Normally, actually, this type of question, all we need to do is to stand in front of the Ho Chin Sun map, and then we'll start pointing at areas. Of course, over the years, we have an engagement with a lot of these government-owned, government-linked companies. The sad reality is that a lot of lands will be under the purview of like different ministry or different stakeholder. In theory, if it's a Wahyu kind of situation, you know, from top down, very strong direction, a lot can be done. But the point is, you will have a small entity or a created entity trying to push this idea, and then they will langgar a lot roadblocks. And then the simple answer will, whoever that's sitting or have the gatekeeper will say, oh, why do affordable housing? I think got developer XYZ, if we, JV can make so much GDV, then the idea of affordable housing is lost. Tan Sri, I hope that answers the
Thank you.
question.
So, can we have some questions from the floor? No? Maybe, yeah, sorry.
There's a mic here.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Yeah, my name is Ernest Azad. I'm not a developer, contractor, or anything like that, so I'm quite outside the industry. But I'm in the industry because I do mostly building construction law. So as a lawyer, I understand a lot of the effects. And one of the first things I like to address is Encik Ismail Ho suggestion about land banks and the army camps. I personally know that there, under the Federal Land Development Authority, you have army camps being relocated. One of the army camps was Majidi Barracks in Johor Bahru, right in the center of town, because army camps need not necessarily be in town. It can be relocated, and that land be used for the purpose of maybe low and medium cost housing. That's one aspect of it. Then the issue of the state and federal government, yes, state land is a state matter. So federal government can or have to work with the state government. Now, I think we all know we can work with certain state governments now and not with the others. I think the reason's obvious. Now, that's one thing. The other point actually was by Mr. Benjamin Ong, very hard-hitting speech. He literally ruled out housing for affordable housing. So, okay, now, I would like to actually link up this topic with the one that we had earlier on sustainable development, technology, and so on. I'm looking at probably traditional housing, we can't afford it. I mean, a lot of people can't afford it today because land is expensive and building costs and all this have gone up. All the previous speakers have talked about it. When I come to housing, okay, I'm looking at, maybe somebody can look into it, link up with this, modular houses, because that's the way it's going on. I think in China, other countries are starting on this. We have to be innovative, really we have to be. Traditional housing development in this country, I think Mr. Benjamin was right, because it's really out of range for a lot of people, okay? And of course not going to come down. We can't control the price of material. So modular housing is something, maybe somebody can look into this, but there's to be a lot of research. And innovativeness can come from there. ESG can be applied, green technology can be applied, saving on electricity, and so on. So these are some of the areas. Maybe somebody has to sit down and do some research and come up with some innovative ideas. Thank you. Very much.
Thank you for your comment. So Ishmael first on the first question.
So of course, as mentioned, ideally, when we relocate those land, then how do you utilize it? But the reality is often what's the best GDV? How do I monetize it? So that's what we see. So, like I said, it has to be like a top-down direction. Say we move this, and this is mainly for affordable housing. There are already, example, a lot of land banks under Finance Ministry that actually you have future MRT2, future MRT3 nearby. So those are the ones that should be earmarked that, okay, affordable housing kita letak berapa ribu unit. But when the time comes, probably XYZ development.
Thank you. Benjamin, the second question.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Modular housing, yes, it is an idea. In fact, even in Malaysia, there are many developers, contractors, suppliers. We are studying those. And even just now, Professor Sarly also has proposed some quite innovative ideas. The reality is this. Material prices have gone up. If we talk about like what we call this precast housing. Precast is more expensive today compared to standard brick and mortar, column and beams construction. And why Malaysia is still challenged, facing this challenge of building like precast housing or modular housing for now, it is because of the cost. Our scale is just not big enough. Singapore HDB uses precast housing, supplied by Malaysian contractors. Factory in Johor Bahru. Gamuda Precast and some of the biggest precast players supply to Singapore HDB. So, sorry, the guy who question in the back. Yes, modular housing is the way to go. Singapore is doing it because HDB is 500 Sing per square foot. Malaysia, unfortunately, government housing control, PKJA 40,000 or now 50,000 ringgit. PKJB 100,000 ringgit. And of course, we have minimum sizes to comply because people can't live in pigeonholes. We can't afford it. And even Malaysian, as I said, Malaysians are very smart. They sell to Singapore. On the other part, yes, there is a collective effort, a little bit touching on what Ishmael has mentioned. There are many government bodies. Let me name you, just on my notes alone, there are so many so-called affordable housing institutions. Agencies. One Malaysia People's Housing Program, PRIMA. Scheme Rumah Pertamaku, SPR or SPM, UPSR, whatever. Rumah Selangorku, My Home, Resident Wilayah, Rumah WIP. All of them, various different agencies, with their own various different land bank and requirements, which we as a developer has to go and comply with all of them differently, in different locations, selling at different prices. Yeah, so that's a very good point. Why can't they all work together?
Yeah.
I don't know. But if they can work together, collectively, can we do something better? Yes, we can.
Yeah.
So this is something for the government to take note.
Thank you. Mr. Akitek, do you have any comment?
I think I agree with Benjamin. As I mentioned in my short presentation just now, in the early one, it's a systemic problem. So if you look at the separation between the federal and the state, and of course we all know why they don't work together. So it needs a stronger political will from the top, ready to push everybody together, and perhaps in this current Madani framework, it needs to be done now, or else, as I mentioned, if you keep doing the same thing, you'll end up with the same result. There's no improvement.
Yes, thank you. We were going to stop in about 5-10 minutes. So one more question from the floor. Yes, thank you very much. Ho, Mr. Ho.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum, Tan Sri Rahim. You have difficulty in pronouncing Ho Chin Soon research. What I want to add on is, firstly, the moderator, Tan Sri Rahim, is a politician also. So you understand that a lot of beautiful lands which can be used for low cost or affordable housing were not given the priority. Today, of course, if you look at Kota Damansara, the Rubber Research Institute land was a perfect piece of land for affordable housing. We also realized under Ishmael Ho's CEO-ship, the proposed MRT3 Circle Line now no longer connects to Bandar Malaysia, which was the old Sungai Besi Military Airport. That piece of land is also suitable for affordable housing, and so forth. But the difficulty, as map makers, I'm sure also you know, Kampong Baru, since Dr. Mahathir's time until today, cannot resolve. They were asking only for 800 ringgit per square foot, 400 ringgit per square foot when Golden Triangle lands were 800 ringgit per square foot. Now that it is a few thousand ringgit, Kampong Baru people may be asking for half or even more or the same price. So there are certain difficulties. I'm going to stop here. I'm not here to ask anything, but just to say that if the political will is strong, it can be done if you follow, for example, Singapore. I have a lot of valuable friends here who have told me their experience. When they work in Singapore, the government back then, under Lee Kuan Yew, acquired the land and they paid them in 1970 prices. Of course, recently, the Singapore government have got so much land, they already now, okay, fair enough, you can have market value. So maybe we can use the Land Acquisition Act, whether it is Malay reserve land or non-Malay reserve land, to acquire these pieces with a political will and get these things done. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. In case anybody missed that, that was Ho Chin Soon. Okay, before we adjourn, allow me to give my own thoughts on the subject matter. It's true what Mr. Ho said. I used to be a politician, but I'm no more a politician now. Part-time consultant. As we talk about the post-pandemic era, it is sad to note that some basic challenges in the market still lurks and haunts us. The issue of housing affordability has been haunting the market for decades, but has surfaced to the top, especially in the past decade or two. As a matter of fact, it is not just a big issue to us here in Malaysia, but also across the globe. I have raised this issue when I was in the Senate before. Here in Malaysia, my own opinion is that we have too many government agencies, as Benjamin said, dealing with the housing problem. Yes, we have the Ministry of Housing, but land is a state matter in this country. The ministry can only advise, but the carrying out and solving of the housing problem is up to the various state governments. And there is UDA, Syarikat Perumahan Negara, and Prima, all carrying out government housing policies, sometimes contradicting each other's policies. Unlike in Singapore, as Benjamin points out, For example, there is only one agency, the HDB, that is able to solve and overcome the housing problem easier than we do here. I understand more than 95% Singaporeans own their own properties. Different roles need to be played from both the public and private sector, and together we hope that the next steps and actions will be carried out by everyone diligently in order to work towards a solution to the housing affordability issue. The underlying issues that contributed to the complexity of the problem are in dire need to be systematically addressed for a long-term and sustainable solution. And just for the current working population, not just for the current working population, our children, but also to our grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren. Thank you once again to the panelists present and all of you for staying back to listen to our speakers. And thank you for the participation from the floor. Have a good day and enjoy the last session. Thank you very much.